The cathedral's stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across marble floors, but the beauty felt like a mockery. Jane Riller stood at the altar in a Vera Wang gown that cost more than her mother's annual salary, her bouquet of white roses trembling in her grip. Around her, Seoul's elite filled the pews, business moguls in custom suits, socialites dripping in diamonds, cameras flashing like hungry predators. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, his voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. Jane's chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. The dress felt like a straitjacket. Ethan Carter stood beside her, his hand gripping her arm just above the elbow, tight enough to bruise, hidden beneath lace sleeves. To the crowd, he looked like the perfect groom, tall, handsome, heir to a shipping empire. They couldn't see his fingers digging into her flesh. They never did. "Stop!" Jane whispered. The priest paused. Ethan's grip tightened. "Stop!" Jane's voice rang out, clear and sharp. 300 heads turned. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "I can't do this." Jane's voice shook, but the words kept coming. "I won't marry you." Ethan's face transformed. The charming mask cracked, revealing the monster beneath. "Hiss me," he hissed, his handsome features twisting with rage. His hand rose, that familiar, terrible motion Jane had learned to fear. The slap was coming. It always came. But this time, Jane's hand shot up and caught his wrist mid-air. Time stopped. The entire cathedral gasped as one. Phones emerged from designer purses, recording everything. Jane's fingers wrapped around Ethan's wrist like steel. She could feel his pulse racing with fury. For months, she had cowered. For months, she had made herself small. Not anymore. Her palm connected with his cheek. Crack! The sound echoing off ancient stone walls. Before he could react, she slapped him again, harder, channeling every moment of pain, every insult, every bruise he'd hidden beneath her clothes. "Never again!" Her voice didn't sound like her own. It sounded like thunder. Ethan stumbled backward, his face scarlet with shock and rage. The crowd erupted in chaos, gasps, shouts, the clicking of cameras capturing his humiliation. "Let her go." The voice cut through the noise like a blade, deep, commanding, absolutely certain. Everyone turned. A man strode down the center aisle, his black suit immaculate, his presence filling the cathedral like an approaching storm. Kang Woo-Jin. Even in her chaos, Jane felt the shift in the room, people recognizing him, fear and respect washing over faces. He reached the altar in seconds. Without hesitation, his fist connected with Ethan's jaw. The groom crashed to the marble floor, blood trickling from his lip. Woo-Jin didn't even look down at him. Instead, he reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. The rustle of paper was deafening in the sudden silence. He unfolded it with deliberate slowness, then held it high for everyone to see. A marriage certificate, official stamps, legal signatures. Jane Miller, Kang Woo-Jin. "Your wife is mine now, Ethan Carter," Woo-Jin's voice carried to every corner of the cathedral. Ethan looked up from the floor, and Jane watched the blood drain from his face until he was pale as death itself. Woo-Jin's dark eyes scanned the crowd, lingering on the cameras. Let everyone watching here and around the world witness this moment. He extended his hand to Jane. She stared at it, her mind reeling. How had she gotten here? How did a broken girl from Ohio end up standing between two men in a Seoul cathedral, one bleeding on the floor, the other offering salvation? The answer lay 6 months in the past, in a moment when hope had died, and something fiercer had been born from its ashes. 6 months earlier. Jane Miller's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor of Incheon International Airport as she dragged two overstuffed suitcases toward the exit. 24 years old, $3,000 in her bank account, and a dream bigger than the airplane that had carried her across the Pacific. Seoul sprawled before her through the terminal windows, a glittering metropolis of possibility. She'd worked 3 jobs for 2 years to save enough for her fashion and business degree at Seoul University. This was it, her chance to become someone. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Remember why you're there. Find opportunity. Your brother's treatment won't pay for itself." Jane's stomach twisted, but she pushed the guilt down. Tommy was only 16, and his medical bills were crushing their family. Her mother had made it clear Jane needed to succeed. More than that, she needed to find security, preferably in the form of a wealthy husband. "I'm here to study," Jane had argued before leaving Ohio. "You're there to build a future," her mother had replied. "Don't waste it." The first month passed in a blur of classes, street food, and wonder. Seoul was everything Ohio wasn't: vibrant, fast, alive. Jane sketched designs in her notebooks during lectures, dreaming of her own fashion line someday. Then came the university gala. Jane had borrowed a dress from her roommate. Nothing fancy, but it fit well. She wasn't planning to stay long, but then she bumped into him. Ethan Carter. "I'm so sorry," Jane had gasped, watching expensive wine drip down his shirt. He laughed, actually laughed. "You just gave me an excuse to leave early. I owe you." He was beautiful, tall with perfectly styled dark hair and a smile that could melt glaciers. Later, she'd learn he was the heir to Carter Shipping, worth more money than Jane could comprehend. "Let me buy you coffee to apologize," she offered. "How about I buy you dinner instead?" His smile was charming, warm. "I'm Ethan." For 3 months, Jane lived in a fairy tale. Roses appeared in her dorm room, designer bags she'd never dreamed of owning, weekend trips to Jeju Island. Ethan introduced her to Seoul's elite, always with his arm around her waist, showing her off like a prize. "You're so different from other girls," he'd tell her, "so genuine." Jane fell completely in love. Her mother's calls became more frequent. "This is good, Jane, very good. Don't mess this up." The shift was subtle at first. 4 months in, they attended a restaurant opening. Jane wore a dress she'd designed herself, proud of the work. "That's what you're wearing?" Ethan's tone was light, but his eyes weren't. "It looks homemade." "I made it," Jane said, hurt creeping in. "Exactly." He'd bought her a new dress the next day. Expensive, not hers. Month 5 brought the first public fight. Jane had laughed at another student's joke during a group project meeting. That night, Ethan had screamed at her in a restaurant, accusing her of flirting, of embarrassing him, of being ungrateful. "After everything I've done for you," his voice carried across the dining room. Jane had apologized profusely, believing somehow she'd caused his anger. Other diners had stared. She'd felt so small. Month 6 shattered everything. She'd been talking to a male classmate about a project when Ethan appeared. She saw his hand coming, but was too shocked to move. The slap echoed across the campus quad. "Don't ever disrespect me again," he said calmly, then walked away. Jane had stood there, cheek burning, tears streaming, while students pretended not to notice. That night, crying in her dorm, she'd told herself it was a mistake. He was stressed. She shouldn't have been so friendly with another guy. It was her fault. Her roommate Soo-jin had grabbed her shoulders. "Jane, this isn't love. This is abuse. You need to leave." "I don't understand," Jane whispered. "He loves me. He gets overwhelmed." "You're making excuses for someone who hit you." "My family needs this," the truth slipped out. My brother needs treatment. My mom says Ethan's family connections could help. I can't just throw that away because of one mistake. Soo-jin's eyes were filled with tears. You're worth more than money, Jane. But was she? Jane had spent her whole life being told she wasn't enough. Not pretty enough, not smart enough, not valuable enough. Ethan made her feel special. Yes, there were bad moments, but the good ones stopped coming. Ethan's secretary, Min-so, appeared more frequently, a beautiful woman with a sharp smile who whispered in Ethan's ear and smirked at Jane like she knew a secret. Ethan started canceling dates, returning home late smelling of perfume, but exploding in rage if Jane asked questions. You're paranoid, crazy, no wonder I need space. Jane stopped calling her friends. They didn't understand. She stopped designing. Ethan said her work was cute, but amateur. She stopped eating regularly. Ethan commented on her weight. She stopped being Jane and became a shadow, trying to anticipate his moods, avoid his anger, earn back the man she'd fallen for. Her mother's pressure intensified. The wedding is in 8 weeks. His family is handling everything. Don't ruin this, Jane. Your brother is counting on you. Financial dependence had wrapped around Jane like chains. Ethan paid her tuition, her rent, and gave her an allowance. Without him, she had nothing. Without him, Tommy's treatment stopped. Without him, she proved her mother right. She was worthless. Sometimes, late at night, Jane would notice a black Range Rover parked across from her building. She'd see it at cafes, at school, in random places. Part of her wondered if Ethan was having her followed. Part of her was too exhausted to care. Her deepest fear crystallized in those dark hours. Maybe she deserved this. Maybe this is all she was worth. She had no idea that the man in that black Range Rover was watching for entirely different reasons, or that he was about to change everything. The Seoul Grand Hyatt Ballroom was a masterpiece of opulence. Massive crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from gilded ceilings, casting prismatic light across marble floors polished to mirror perfection. Korea's elites circulated in clusters. CEOs in bespoke Italian suits, socialites draped in diamonds that could fund universities, politicians practicing their public smiles. The annual charity gala benefiting children's hospitals was less about charity and more about being seen, about status, about power. Jane Miller stood near the champagne fountain in a blue silk gown that had consumed 3 months of careful saving. She'd chosen the color deliberately. Ethan had once said blue made her eyes sparkle. The dress hugged her frame elegantly. Modest, yet beautiful, everything she'd learned to be under his exacting standards. Tonight will be different, she whispered to her reflection in a nearby window. He's been sweet all week. And he had been. No cruel comments about her appearance, no sudden rages over imagined slights. He'd even called her beautiful that morning, the compliment falling from his lips like a rare treasure. Jane clung to these moments desperately, evidence that the charming man she'd fallen for still existed somewhere beneath the monster. Ethan materialized beside her, devastatingly handsome in his Tom Ford tuxedo, and slid his arm around her waist with practiced possessiveness. "Stay close tonight," he murmured against her ear. "Important people everywhere. I need you looking perfect." For 90 blissful minutes, Jane allowed herself to believe in the fairy tale again. Ethan introduced her to titans of industry, his hand never leaving the small of her back, his smile genuine enough to seem real. She made polite conversation with politicians' wives, laughed at CEOs' mediocre jokes, played the role of perfect girlfriend with Academy Award precision. Then Jane saw her. Min-so glided through the crowd like a shark through shallow water, her red dress so tight it looked sprayed on, her glossy black hair cascading over bare shoulders. Ethan's secretary had always made Jane's skin crawl. Something predatory in her smile, something knowing in her eyes whenever they met Jane's. Min-so caught Jane's gaze across the room and smiled. Predatory. victorious. Jane's stomach knotted. The secretary approached with champagne in manicured hands, leaning close to whisper in Ethan's ear. Jane watched her fiancé's face transform, watched charm curdle into something ugly and familiar, watched his jaw clench, watched his eyes go cold. "What?" Jane asked, anxiety spiking. "Ethan, what's wrong?" His fingers dug into her waist hard enough to bruise. "You gave Park Ji-hoon your number?" "What? No, I've been standing with you all night. Min-so saw you." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that Jane had learned to fear. "Flirting with that CEO, giving him your contact information, making me look like a fool in front of everyone." "Ethan, I swear to God, I didn't even speak to—" The unexpected slap came so fast, Jane barely registered the motion. His palm cracked across her face like a gunshot, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent ballroom. 300 heads turned in perfect synchronization. Jane's champagne flute tumbled from nerveless fingers, shattering against marble. The liquid splashed across her carefully chosen blue silk gown, spreading dark stains like accusations. Her cheek burned. Her ear rang. Her heart stopped. For one suspended moment, nobody moved. The entire ballroom held its collective breath. Then came the laughter. Nervous at first, uncomfortable chuckles from people who didn't know how to process public violence. Then cruel. Socialites whispered behind jeweled hands, their eyes bright with schadenfreude. Men smirked into their drinks, already composing the gossip they'd share. Phones emerged from designer clutches like predators scenting blood, cameras focusing on Jane's humiliation with journalistic hunger. "God, how pathetic," someone murmured, their voice carrying in the acoustically perfect space. "She won't leave him, though," another voice added, sharp with certainty. "She never does. She can't." Ethan grabbed Jane's arm, his fingers wrapping around her bicep hard enough to leave marks. "You don't embarrass me in public," he hissed, his handsome face twisted with rage. Then louder, projecting to their audience with theatrical precision, "She can't survive without me. She has nothing. No money, no future, no options. Nothing." His words landed like physical blows. Around them, Seoul's elite nodded in agreement. Jane was an American nobody, a charity case, a girl who'd gotten lucky catching a rich man's attention. Something inside Jane cracked. Not her heart. That had broken months ago, so many times she'd lost count of the fractures. Something deeper. Something that had been holding the shattered pieces together through sheer force of will and desperate hope. She looked at Ethan's face, still handsome, still entitled, absolutely certain of her submission, and felt rage ignite in her chest like wildfire. Without speaking, without explaining, Jane yanked her arm free with strength she didn't possess. She kicked off her Louboutin heels, another gift from Ethan, another chain disguised as generosity, and ran. Behind her, Ethan's laughter followed her out of the ballroom. He didn't chase her. He never did. Why would he? They both knew she'd come crawling back. For 2 days, Jane existed in a fog of numbness. She ignored Ethan's calls, first angry, then apologetic, then threatening. She returned his flowers, her jewelry, his expensive chocolate, his gifts wrapped in false remorse. Her roommate Soo-jin brought her soup and held her while she cried, saying nothing because there was nothing left to say. On the 3rd day, Ethan found her. Jane was walking home from campus, lost in thought, when his Porsche pulled up to the curb. He leaned out the window, Gucci sunglasses hiding his eyes, his smile dangerous. "Stop being dramatic, Jane. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Be ready." "I can't marry you." Jane's voice came out smaller than she wanted. He laughed, actually laughed. "Yes, you can. Yes, you will." He said it like stating gravity or sunrise, an immutable fact. "We both know you have nowhere else to go. No money, no options. You need me." He drove away without waiting for her response, leaving Jane standing on the sidewalk with her heart in her throat. Her hands shook as she dialed her mother. "Mom, I can't do this. I can't marry him. He hit me in front of 300 people." "Stop." Her voice could have frozen the Han River. "Your brother needs surgery next month. $60,000, Jane. The Carter family has connections to the best cardiac surgeons in Asia. You will not throw away this family's future because you're oversensitive." "Mom, he's cheating on me. He's abusive. Please, I'm begging." "Marriage is a compromise. You think your father and I never fought? You think I didn't make sacrifices? Grow up. Be grateful someone like Ethan wants to marry you at all. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Don't you dare be selfish." The line went dead. Jane stood on the busy Seoul sidewalk, hundreds of people flowing around her like water around stone, and realized with crushing finality that she was utterly, completely alone. That night, she made a decision. One final confrontation. She would end this herself, regardless of the consequences. She still had keys to Ethan's penthouse. She let herself in quietly after midnight, rehearsing the words she'd say, how she'd finally find courage to walk away, even if it meant her brother's surgery, even if it meant her mother's rage, even if it meant proving she was worthless after all. Then she heard the sounds. Laughter, feminine and achingly familiar, coming from the master bedroom. Her feet carried her forward against every instinct screaming to run. The door was cracked open. Through the gap, she saw them tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets. Ethan, Min-so, her secretary, his lover. The door creaked. Ethan's head turned. No shame flickered across his handsome face. No panic, no guilt. Just irritation, like she'd interrupted a business meeting. "Jesus Christ, Jane, why didn't you call before coming over?" Min-so didn't even bother covering herself, her laugh high and cruel. "Oops, awkward." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think, couldn't process the casual cruelty, the shamelessness, the confirmation of what she'd known but refused to believe. She turned and ran for the second time in 3 days. This time she had no destination, just movement. Because if she stopped moving, she would shatter into pieces too small to ever reassemble. Behind her, Ethan didn't chase. He never did. Seoul's Gangnam district pulsed with neon at 2 a.m. Luxury boutiques dark behind security gates, clubs throbbing with bass, the wealthy and reckless spilling onto sidewalks. Jane saw none of it. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled down the street, still wearing the clothes she'd thrown on to confront Ethan. Jeans, a wrinkled sweater, sneakers she'd grabbed without thinking. She had no plan. Home felt impossible. Soo-jin would ask questions Jane couldn't answer. Her mother would say, "I told you so," in 1,000 cutting ways. She was alone in a country thousands of miles from Ohio, engaged to a man who just confirmed her worst fears, trapped by family obligations and financial dependence. The tears came harder, hot and endless. Jane stepped off the curb without looking. Brakes screamed. Rubber burned against asphalt. A black Range Rover stopped so close Jane felt the heat from its engine. She stood frozen in the headlights, thinking absurdly that maybe this would solve everything. Maybe this would be easier than the slow death of staying with Ethan or the shame of crawling home to America. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her semester's tuition. Even through her tears, Jane registered the dangerous calm in his movements, the absolute authority in his posture, the way he moved like someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Are you trying to die?" His voice was deep, Korean accented, but speaking perfect English, not angry, but genuinely concerned. Jane laughed, a broken, desperate sound that was closer to sobbing. "Maybe I am." Her legs buckled. She would have collapsed onto the dirty Seoul pavement, but he caught her effortlessly. Strong arms, the scent of cedar, and something darker like smoke, expensive cologne she couldn't name. He studied her face with dark eyes that seemed to catalog every tear, every bruise of the soul. "You're worth more than this moment," he said, quietly, with absolute conviction, "even if you can't see it right now." He guided her to the passenger seat with surprising gentleness, made a phone call in rapid Korean, then drove in silence through Seoul's glittering streets. Not to a hospital, not to a police station, to a quiet cafe in Itaewon that Jane didn't recognize. Inside, he spoke to the owner, an older woman who nodded and disappeared. Money changed hands, though Jane didn't see how much. Within minutes, the cafe was empty except for the two of them. "Sit," he gestured to a corner booth, his tone gentle but leaving no room for argument. "I'll get you something warm." He returned with hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and a dusting of cinnamon, sitting across from her without speaking, just waiting, patient, present. The kindness broke something in Jane. Between sobs and hiccups, the entire story poured out. Ethan's transformation from prince to monster, her mother's financial pressure, the gala humiliation, the betrayal she just witnessed. Months of suppressed pain and fear and shame came flooding out in a cafe at 2 a.m. to a stranger whose name she didn't even know. Kang Woo-Jin, he introduced himself somewhere in her confession, listened without interrupting. No judgment darkened his expression, no pity diluted his attention, just steady, absolute focus, like her words mattered, like she mattered. When Jane finally fell silent, exhausted, and empty, he spoke. "You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are surviving an impossible situation. That takes more strength than most people possess in their entire lives." Jane's breath caught. In 6 months with Ethan, in 24 years with her mother, nobody had ever said anything like that. Woo-Jin stood, extending his hand. "You need rest, safety. I have a place where you can have both." The apartment stole Jane's breath, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's endless sprawl of lights, minimalist furniture that screamed wealth without ostentation, art on the walls that even Jane's untrained eye recognized as valuable. Staff appeared like they'd been summoned telepathically, a housekeeper, a driver, a woman who introduced herself as the household manager. "Anything she needs," Woo-Jin told them in Korean, then repeated in English for Jane's benefit. "Anything at all. Treat her like family." He turned to Jane, his dark eyes softer than she'd expected. "Sleep, eat, breathe. Take the time you need. I'll check on you tomorrow." "Why are you doing this?" Jane whispered, confusion cutting through exhaustion. Something flickered in his expression. Old pain, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "Let's just say I know what it's like to feel trapped, and I have the resources to offer you a way out, even if it's temporary. That's reason enough." He left, and Jane collapsed onto a bed softer than clouds, falling into dreamless sleep for the first time in months. Woo-Jin kept his promise. The next morning, he appeared with fresh strawberries, buttery croissants from a French bakery, and shopping bags from boutiques Jane had only ever window shopped at. "How did you know my size?" Jane asked, staring at perfectly fitted designer clothes. His smile was mysterious, almost playful. "I pay attention to details. It's how I've survived in business." The day unfolded like a dream Jane was afraid to wake from. Garden walks through his private estate, where she learned he collected rare orchids and knew their Latin names. Conversations about her abandoned fashion designs, the business degree gathering dust, dreams she'd had before Ethan convinced her they were childish. Woo-Jin listened like her words valuable, asked questions that showed genuine interest, made her feel intelligent instead of stupid for the first time in half a year. "What do you do exactly?" Jane finally asked, as they wandered through his temperature-controlled greenhouse. "Business, import, export, real estate investments." His tone suggested the conversation had boundaries. "Some dealings are complicated, but it's legal enough to sleep at night." By evening, they were at his rooftop pool, Seoul's skyline painting the sunset in golds and pinks and purples Jane didn't have names for. She borrowed a designer swimsuit, perfectly fitted, of course, and for the first time in months, laughed without fear constricting her chest. Woo-Jin's humor surprised her, dry, intelligent, quick in ways that made her feel clever for understanding his references. He made her feel valued instead of burdensome, interesting instead of annoying. They splashed like children, the playfulness a relief after months of walking on eggshells. An accidental touch became intentional. Jane found herself close to him in the warm water, droplets clinging to his dark hair, his eyes intense on hers. "You deserve to be treasured," he said softly, cupping her face with surprising tenderness, "not broken down piece by piece until there's nothing left." He kissed her. Jane kissed back without thinking, months of suppressed desire and desperate need for connection flooding through her. It felt nothing like Ethan, no possession, no demand for submission, just two people reaching for each other. Woo-Jin lifted her from the pool effortlessly, carrying her to the cabana. He set her down gently, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Are you sure?" His voice was rough with restraint. "I won't do anything you don't want. Say the word and we stop." Jane pulled him closer, her whisper fierce and certain. "Make me feel alive again." What followed was tender, passionate, achingly different from anything she'd experienced. He touched her like she was precious, asking permission, watching her responses, making her pleasure the priority. Afterward, he held her close, stroking her hair, asking for nothing, offering everything. For a few hours, Jane felt human again. Dawn brought reality crashing back. "I'm getting married in 2 weeks," Jane whispered against his chest, the words tasting like ash. "Only if you choose to be." Woo-Jin's voice held absolute certainty, like he could rewrite reality through will alone. Panic seized Jane's chest. What was she doing? This was wrong. Ethan, her family obligations, her brother's surgery, her mother's expectations. "I'm sorry, I have to go. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have." She grabbed her clothes and ran, leaving Woo-Jin standing in the morning light. He watched her flee, jaw clenched, then picked up his phone. "Prepare the documents," he said in Korean to whoever answered. "The marriage contract, everything we discussed, all the paperwork. It's time." The bridal suite at the Grand Cathedral smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. Jane sat motionless before an ornate mirror while a makeup artist dabbed concealer over the faded bruise on her cheekbone, a parting gift from Ethan 3 days ago when she'd tried one last time to cancel the wedding. "A bit more coverage here," the artist murmured professionally, as if hiding evidence of abuse was just another part of bridal prep. Jane's eyes in the mirror looked dead. The Vera Wang gown, selected by Ethan's mother, paid for by Ethan's money, felt like a burial shroud. $70,000 of silk and lace to dress a corpse. Her mother bustled around the suite, phone in one hand, champagne in the other. "Smile, Jane, this is your special day." Special day of selling my soul, Jane thought, her face remaining blank. Outside, the cathedral was filled with Seoul's elite. Through the window, Jane could see luxury cars disgorging business moguls in bespoke suits, socialites in designer gowns, photographers jostling for position. This wasn't a wedding, it was a merger, a transaction, a public declaration of ownership. At the altar, Ethan waited. Even from here, Jane could see his smug smile, the possessive way he adjusted his cufflinks, the entitled tilt of his head. He'd already won. She was his property now, legally bound, publicly claimed. The music began. Pachelbel's canon, predictable, traditional, everything Ethan demanded. Jane's feet moved mechanically down the aisle. Each step felt like a funeral march. Faces blurred past, strangers witnessing her execution, smiling like this was beautiful instead of horrific. Ethan's hand reached for hers as she arrived. His grip was too tight, his fingers crushing hers in warning. "Behave," the pressure said. "You're mine now." The priest began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Jane's vision tunneled. She couldn't breathe in the expensive dress, couldn't think past the crushing weight of wrong. To join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Woo-Jin's words echoed in Jane's mind. Only if you choose to be. Jane's hand shot up. "Stop!" The priest faltered. 300 heads turned. "Stop!" Jane repeated, louder, her voice carrying through the cathedral. "I can't do this." Ethan's mask slipped. "What did you just say?" "I won't marry you." Jane's voice grew stronger with each word. "I won't marry a man who treats me like garbage, who hits me, who cheats on me, who makes me feel worthless every single day." Whispers erupted like wildfire. Cameras lifted. Ethan's face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare embarrass me." He grabbed her arm with brutal force, his fingers digging into old bruises. His hand rose, that familiar, terrible motion. The slap was coming. The cameras would catch it, everyone would see, and they'd still blame her somehow. But Jane's hand shot up faster. She caught his wrist midair. The entire cathedral gasped as one. Jane's fingers wrapped around Ethan's wrist like steel, stopping his violence for the first time in 6 months. She could feel his pulse racing with fury, and she could see shock replacing rage in his eyes. Her palm connected with his cheek. Crack! The sound echoing off stone walls and stained glass. Before he could react, before he could process, she slapped him again, harder, all her suppressed rage channeling through her arm. "Never touch me again." The cathedral exploded, guests screaming, cameras flashing like lightning, Ethan stumbling backward, his face scarlet with shock and humiliation. "How dare you?" he shouted, recovering. "You ungrateful—" "Let her go." The voice cut through chaos like a blade, deep, commanding, absolutely certain. Every head turned toward the cathedral's entrance. Kang Woo-Jin strode down the center aisle in a black suit that made him look like death incarnate. His presence filled the space, radiating danger and authority. 4 bodyguards flanked him, their synchronized movements parting the crowd like water. Jane's heart stopped. Kang Woo-Jin reached the altar in seconds. Without hesitation, without warning, his fist connected with Ethan's jaw. The groom crashed to the marble floor, blood trickling from his nose. Woo-Jin didn't even look at him. Instead, he reached into his jacket with theatrical precision and withdrew a folded document. The rustle of paper was deafening in the shocked silence. He unfolded it, slowly, deliberately, then held it up high above his head for everyone to see. A marriage certificate. Official government stamps, legal signatures in black ink. Jane Miller, Kang Woo-Jin. Dated 3 days ago. "Your wife is mine now, Ethan Carter." Woo-Jin's voice carried to every corner of the cathedral, calm and absolute. Ethan looked up from the floor, confusion bleeding into recognition, then terror. "What? That's impossible. Who the hell are you?" Woo-Jin smiled, cold, dangerous. "I am Kang Woo-Jin." He paused, letting the name sink in. Around the cathedral, Jane saw faces pale, and she saw people stepping back instinctively. Korea's hidden power, the man behind half the empires you worship. And nothing is impossible for me. The crowd erupted in whispers. Jane heard fragments. "The Kang family, underground networks. He owns everything. You don't cross him." Ethan's face was drained of all colors. Woo-Jin turned to the frozen priest. "Continue the ceremony. Marry us. Now." The priest stammered. "But the other groom—" Woo-Jin's look could have frozen blood. The priest fell silent. Woo-Jin took Jane's trembling hand, his grip warm and steady. He turned to face her, his dark eyes softening. The priest began again, his voice shaking. Do you, Jane Miller, take this man, Kang Woo-Jin, to be your lawfully wedded husband? Jane's tears streamed freely, but her voice was strong. I do. Do you, Kang Woo-Jin, take this woman, Jane Miller, to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Absolutely. No hesitation, total certainty. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Woo-Jin cupped Jane's face and kissed her deeply, while cameras flashed like lightning, while the crowd erupted in chaos, while her old life shattered completely. Ethan scrambled to his feet, ripping off his wedding ring and throwing it. She was never my type anyway, gold-digging whore. Woo-Jin broke the kiss, turned to Ethan with deadly calm. Your company's board meeting is Monday morning. I suggest you prepare for new ownership. Or don't. Either way, you're finished. He wrapped his arm around Jane and walked her down the aisle, bodyguards clearing their path. Behind them, the cathedral descended into complete chaos. Guests screaming, reporters running for phones, Ethan screaming threats that nobody listened to. Jane looked back once. Ethan stood alone at the altar, surrounded by the ruins of his perfect wedding, his face twisted with impotent rage. She felt nothing for him. Not anymore. Woo-Jin's car waited outside, a Rolls-Royce Phantom with tinted windows. He helped her inside, his touch gentle despite the violence he'd just displayed. As they pulled away, Jane finally found her voice. You prepared a marriage certificate? When? Woo-Jin's smile was slight but genuine. The night you ran from my apartment. I told you, I pay attention to details. I knew you'd try to go through with it. I couldn't let that happen. But how did you... I have resources, connections. When I want something to happen, it happens. He took her hand. I wanted you for free, so I made you free. Jane stared at this man who had just demolished her entire world and rebuilt it in minutes. I don't even know who you really are. You'll learn. We have time now. All the time in the world.
The Kang estate made Ethan's penthouse look like a college dorm. Jane stood in the marble foyer, staring at her reflection in floors polished to mirror perfection, trying to process the palace she'd apparently married into. Sweeping staircases curved upward on both sides, crystal chandeliers the size of cars, staff lined up in perfect formation, maids, drivers, security, housekeepers, at least 20 people waiting to meet her. I didn't know you were this powerful, Jane whispered. Woo-Jin smiled, loosening his tie. Rest, wife. Tomorrow changes everything. That night, Jane slept in a bedroom bigger than her childhood home. The bed could fit 6 people. The bathroom had heated floors and a shower with more settings than her first car. Morning brought new shocks. Breakfast appeared without her asking. French toast, fresh fruit, Korean banchan, and coffee made exactly how she liked it, though she'd never told anyone. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Park, presented her with a black card. No limit, Mrs. Kang, the woman said with a respectful bow. Jane stared at the matte black Amex like it might explode. I can't possibly. Her phone rang. Woo-Jin's voice was warm. Buy whatever makes you happy. Renovate the entire estate if you want. The card has no spending limit. I don't want to be the gold digger Ethan said I was. Woo-Jin's tone shifted, seriously. You're not taking anything. I'm giving freely. There's a difference. You saved me from becoming a man without heart. Everything I have is yours. The first week felt like a dream. Jane went shopping, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Designer boutiques where staff recognized the Kang name and treated her like royalty. A new car appeared in the garage, a Tesla Model S in midnight blue with a bow on the hood. The funny moments came unexpectedly. At a wine-tasting event Woo-Jin dragged her to, the sommelier asked her preference. "Which one won't make me dizzy?" Jane asked, genuinely. The room fell silent, then Woo-Jin laughed, genuinely laughed, and the entire party relaxed. By the end of the night, Jane was the most popular person there, her honesty refreshing among Seoul's pretentious elite. At an art auction, Jane wore sneakers with her designer dress. Woo-Jin raised an eyebrow but said nothing. When Jane scratched her nose at the wrong moment, the auctioneer took it as a bid. $50,000, the man called, to the lady in Balenciaga and Nikes. Jane's face went white. "I didn't mean—" "Keep the sneakers," Woo-Jin whimpered, amused. "And the sculpture. You're perfect exactly as you are." But storm clouds were gathering. Jane's mother arrived unannounced, barging past security with practiced entitlement. She found Jane in the garden, attempting to learn orchid care from Woo-Jin's botanist. $60,000, Jane. Your brother needs it now." Jane stood, wiping dirt from her hands. "I'll help with Tommy's surgery, but I won't be controlled anymore." Her mother's laugh was cruel. "You married a stranger for money, and you lecture me about control? You owe us. We raised you, fed you. Your brother is dying, and you're playing gardener in a mansion?" The words hit like physical blows. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe she had sold herself, just to a different man. Worse came from the internet. The wedding video went viral. Edited clips made Jane look calculating, catching Ethan's hand, slapping him, the mysterious billionaire appearing on cue. Headlines screamed, "Gold digger's perfect plan. American opportunist plays Korean billionaire. From nobody to Mrs. Kang, the con of the century." Ethan's PR team worked overtime. Fabricated evidence appeared. Doctored photos of Jane at fancy restaurants with other men, fake text messages planning to trap a rich husband, interviews with friends Jane had never met, claiming she'd planned everything. The harassment intensified. Death threats in her DMs. Strangers recognized her on the street, screaming "whore" and "gold digger." Paparazzi camped outside the estate gates. Jane broke down crying in the library. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I am using you. I married you and I barely know you. What does that make me?" Woo-Jin found her there, pulled her into his arms. "You saved me from loneliness I didn't even recognize, from becoming the kind of man who has everything and feels nothing. You owe no one your peace, Jane. Not your mother, not the internet, not even me." But that night, Jane discovered the truth about her husband. She couldn't sleep and wandered into his office looking for a book, found files instead. Documents detailing Woo-Jin's business empire, legitimate holdings, yes, but also connections to underground power networks, gray area dealings, associations with people whose names made Jane's blood run cold. "You're looking at my past," Woo-Jin's voice came from the doorway. Jane spun, clutching the files. "Who are you really?" He entered slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "I'm someone who built power in a world that doesn't ask questions about methods. I've done things I'm not proud of, hurt people who didn't deserve it, became exactly what my father wanted, ruthless, efficient, untouchable. And now?" Jane's voice shook. "Now I'm leaving that world, for you. For us, for the family I hope we'll build." His eyes met hers with absolute honesty. "I'm liquidating the questionable holdings, cutting ties with dangerous people. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but I'm doing it." "Did I trade one cage for another?" Jane whispered. Woo-Jin's face showed pain. "I would never cage you, but I can't erase my past overnight. If you want to leave, I'll help you. Money, protection, whatever you need. You're not trapped here." Jane wanted to believe him, but doubt ate at her. That week, her mother called daily, demanding money. Online attacks intensified. Paparazzi followed her everywhere. Jane felt the walls closing in. Different walls than Ethan's, but walls nonetheless. The darkest moment came late one night. Jane stood in the massive master bedroom, staring out at Seoul's glittering lights, and felt utterly alone, despite the staff, the husband, the wealth. She'd escaped one trap, but had she simply chosen a prettier prison? Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You don't belong in his world. Leave before you get hurt." Jane stared at the message, her reflection ghostly in the window, and wondered if running was the only option she had left.
Woo-Jin found the sketchbook in a box Jane had shoved under the guest room bed, her old room, the one she retreated to when doubt consumed her. He'd been looking for her, worried after 3 days of watching her withdraw into herself. The leather journal fell open to pages filled with brilliant fashion designs, evening gowns with architectural elements, sustainable fabric innovations, business plans detailed enough to present to investors. Dates showed she'd created this over 2 years, right up until 6 months ago. Then, nothing. Blank pages. "Why did you stop creating?" Woo-Jin asked from the doorway. Jane looked up from where she sat on the bed, eyes red from crying. "Ethan said I wasn't talented enough, that I was wasting time on childish dreams, that I should focus on being the kind of wife he needed." Woo-Jin's jaw clenched. "He was threatened by your brilliance. Men like him can't stand women who outshine them." He sat beside her, flipping through pages with growing excitement. "These are extraordinary, Jane. This sustainability concept, I've seen established designers struggle with this. You solved it at 23. They're just sketches. They're geniuses." He closed the book carefully. "I'm going to do something. You can be angry, but hear me out first." "What are you—" "There's a global business innovation competition. The deadline is next week. I'm submitting your work." He held up a hand as she opened her mouth to protest. "And I'm enrolling you in Seoul Business School's executive program." Jane stood, anger flashing. "Don't make decisions for me. That's what Ethan did. That's what everyone does." Woo-Jin stood too, meeting her eyes. "I'm not controlling you. I'm believing in you. Feel the difference. Ethan made you small because your light threatened him. I'm opening doors because your light deserves to shine. If you walk through them, it is your choice. But I won't let your fear, or his voice in your head, keep those doors closed." Jane stared at him, tears streaming. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail forward. But Jane, you won't fail. You're brilliant. Let the world see it." The first day of business school terrified Jane. She sat in the back of the lecture hall, surrounded by executives twice her age with decades of experience. The professor discussed market disruption strategies that made Jane's head spin. Then he presented a case study, a failing retail company hemorrhaging money. "What would you do?" he asked the class. Seasoned executives proposed complex restructuring, expensive consultants, and market analysis taking months. Jane's hand raised before she could stop it. "Fire half the board." The room went silent. "Excuse me?" The professor raised an eyebrow. Jane stood, her voice gaining strength. "The problem isn't the market. It's leadership protecting their positions instead of the company. Fire the executives who've been there longest. They're the ones blocking innovation because it threatens their relevance. Promote from within, people who actually understand current consumer behavior. Cut the corporate bloat and invest in digital infrastructure. You'll see results in weeks, not months." The professor stared, then smiled. "That's the most brutally efficient answer I've heard in 20 years of teaching. What's your name?" "Jane Kang." Whispers rippled through the room. Everyone knows that name now. By week 3, Jane was top of her class. Professors asked her to present. Students sought her insights. The scared girl was becoming a force. Meanwhile, Woo-Jin executed his own plan. The corporate takeover was surgical. Woo-Jin's team bought Carter Shipping's debt, acquired shares through shell companies, and maneuvered board members. Within 2 weeks, he owned 51% of Ethan's company. He transferred the majority shares to Jane's name. "What's this?" Jane asked, staring at the documents. "Your revenge, if you want it." Woo-Jin's smile was dark. "You're now the majority shareholder of Carter Shipping. You control Ethan's legacy. What you do with that power is entirely up to you." Jane looked at the papers, then at her husband. Will you come with me? I wouldn't miss it for the world. The day Jane walked into Carter Shipping's headquarters, the internet broke. She dressed for war, black Armani power suit, Louboutin heels clicking like gunshots on marble floors, her hair pulled into a severe bun, makeup fierce, the black card visible in her Hermes purse. Woo-Jin security flanked her, but she'd insisted on walking in alone. The executive floor went silent as she passed. Assistants stared. Junior executives whispered. Someone fumbled for their phone. Jane pushed open the boardroom doors mid-presentation. Ethan stood at the head of the table, mid-presentation about quarterly earnings. He froze, marker in hand, face going pale. "Good morning, gentlemen." Jane's voice was ice. "I'm your new majority shareholder, Mrs. Kang Woo-Jin." Ethan's face cycled through disbelief, confusion, then horror. "This is a joke. Security?" Jane walked to the head of the table, set down a leather portfolio. "These documents say otherwise. 51% ownership. Effective immediately. I filed with the Securities Commission this morning." The board members, old men in expensive suits, looked at each other in panic. "You can't possibly," Ethan started. Jane cut him off, taking his seat at the table's head. "Sit down, all of you." The authority in her voice made them obey instinctively. Jane opened her portfolio, pulling out reports. "I've reviewed this company's financials. Wasteful spending, nepotistic hiring, declining market share. We're restructuring. Effective immediately, I'm firing," she read names from a list, "7 executives whose positions exist solely to justify their salaries." Ethan found his voice. "Jane, you can't possibly understand." Jane stood, walked to him slowly. Every eye in the room followed her. Her palm connected with his face. Crack! Echoing off glass walls. "It's Mrs. Kang, and I can do anything I want. I own this company." She turned to the board. "Does anyone else have objections?" Silence. Jane's eyes found Min So cowering in the corner, trying to be invisible. "You, secretary, you're fired." Min So's face went white. "You can't. I've been here 5 years. This is illegal." "I absolutely can. I own 51% of this company. Security won't help you." Jane walked toward her. "Sue me. I have better lawyers than you can afford." The entire executive floor watched as Jane pulled Min So to the service elevator. Phones recorded everything. Jane didn't care. Down in the back alley, large commercial trash bins lined the loading dock. Jane opened one, full of office waste, old papers, food containers. "This is where trash belongs." Jane grabbed Min So by the waist and physically lifted her, adrenaline-fueled strength, dumping her into the bin. Min So screamed, landing in the garbage. "Don't come back," Jane said calmly, then walked back inside. The video was already going viral. #BossLadyJane trended worldwide within an hour. Jane became an internet sensation, the abused girlfriend who became the boss, literally throwing her abuser's mistress in the trash. Jane stood in Ethan's former office, looking out over Seoul's skyline, feeling powerful for the first time in her life. This was just the beginning.
Ethan's final attack was desperate and vicious. 3 days after Jane's boardroom takeover, he held a press conference. Major Korean networks covered it live. He'd assembled fabricated evidence, doctored emails, paid witnesses, even a former roommate of Jane's, whom she'd never met, claiming Jane had planned everything from the start. "Jane Miller seduced me for access to my wealth," Ethan told cameras, his face bruised from Jane's slap. He'd refused makeup to look like a victim. "When I discovered her infidelity with Kang Woo-Jin, she orchestrated this entire scheme to steal my company. She's a calculating opportunist who preys on successful men." The media frenzy was instantaneous. Cable news dissected every claim. Social media exploded with hot takes. Jane's inbox is filled with death threats and marriage proposals in equal measure. Woo-Jin wanted to destroy Ethan legally, financially, and personally. "I can end him in an hour. Say the word." But Jane had a better idea. "No, I'm done letting men fight my battles." She called the producer of Korea's biggest talk show, Seoul Tonight, watched by millions across Asia. I want an interview. Live tomorrow night. Mrs. Kang, perhaps we should prepare, the producer began. No preparation, no pre-screening questions. Live television, yes or no. A pause. We'd be honored. The next evening, Jane walked onto the set of Seoul Tonight in a simple navy dress, expensive but understated, powerful but not ostentatious. Her makeup was minimal. Her jewelry was her wedding ring. The studio audience held its breath as she sat across from Park Min-jung, Korea's toughest interviewer. Mrs. Kang, thank you for joining us. Min-jung's smile was professional. People are calling you a gold digger, an opportunist. What's your response? Jane looked directly into the camera. I stayed with a man who beat me because I was afraid. That's not gold digging. That's survival. She nodded to the production team. Behind her, the screen filled with photos. Jane's bruised arms, faded marks on her ribs, a black eye poorly covered with makeup. Medical records from a hospital visit she'd lied about, claiming she'd fallen. The audience gasped. This is what Ethan Carter did to me, Jane continued, her voice steady. And this. She played an audio recording, Ethan's voice screaming about how worthless she was, threatening worse if she left, is who he really is. The studio was silent except for Ethan's recorded rage. I left because I chose life over slow death, Jane said. That's not scheming. That's courage. What about Kang Woo-Jin? The timing seems. The side door opened. Woo-Jin walked onto the set, unplanned, unannounced. Jane's eyes widened in shock. He sat beside her, taking her hand in full view of millions of viewers. May I? Min-jung, professional despite her surprise, nodded. I pursued Jane because I recognized something in her, a survivor's strength that reminded me of my own mother, who escaped an abusive marriage with nothing. Woo-Jin's voice was quiet, but carried perfectly. She didn't save me with manipulation. She saved me from becoming a man without conscience, someone who built power but forgot humanity. He turned to Jane. Everything I had, wealth, influence, connections, felt empty until I met someone who'd lost everything and still chose kindness. That's not a weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever witnessed. Woo-Jin faced the camera directly. I'm liquidating all questionable business holdings, every gray area dealing, every connection to underground networks. I've submitted documentation to federal regulators. It's all public record now. The studio erupted in whispers. For her, for the family we'll build, for a legitimate legacy worth passing down. His hand tightened on Jane's. She didn't marry me for money. I married her for redemption. Social media exploded in real time. Respect Jane and Survivor Not Victim trended globally. Public opinion shifted like an ocean current changing direction. Then Min-jung received a message on her earpiece. Her eyes widened. We're getting word. Mrs. Kang, you've won the International Fashion Innovation Award. The announcement just came from Paris. The studio screen split, one half showing Jane's shocked face, the other connecting via satellite to the Paris ceremony, where a presenter held her design portfolio. For revolutionary sustainable fashion concepts that could reshape the industry, the Parisian presenter announced in French, English subtitles appearing, Jane Kang. The studio audience erupted in applause. Jane's tears flowed freely. I used to cry on buses, she said into the camera, her voice breaking. Now I cry on private planes, but these are different tears. Standing ovations erupted simultaneously in Seoul, Paris, and across social media platforms worldwide. Jane's phone rang as she left the studio. Her mother. Jane, Her mother's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I failed you. I pushed you toward money instead of protecting you. Your brother's watching. He's so proud of you. I'm so sorry. Jane stopped walking. I'll pay for Tommy's surgery. But Mom, I choose my peace first. I'll help my family, but I won't be controlled ever again. I understand. I'm proud of you. The next morning brought news. Ethan's company auditors had discovered massive embezzlement. He'd been stealing from his own company for years, hiding it in shell accounts. Federal prosecutors moved fast. By evening, footage showed Ethan being led from his apartment in handcuffs, his face no longer handsome but twisted with impotent rage. Jane watched the news with Woo-Jin. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just closure. Do you feel better? Woo-Jin asked. I feel free, Jane corrected. There's a difference. I've moved beyond revenge. I'm building something better now. She opened her laptop to emails from fashion houses requesting consultations, business schools offering teaching positions, abuse survivors thanking her for speaking up. Jane smiled, not because Ethan had fallen, but because she had risen, and she'd done it herself. 2 years later, the Miller Kang Designs flagship store opened in Paris to lines wrapping around the block. Jane stood inside, watching through the window as fashion editors and everyday women alike waited to enter. Her sustainable luxury collection had revolutionized the industry. Beautiful clothes that didn't cost the earth. Seoul, Paris, New York, 3 stores. A 4th is planned for Tokyo. But the stores weren't what made Jane proudest. The From Broken to Bold Foundation occupied an entire building in Seoul's Gangnam district. Inside, abuse survivors found legal help, therapy, job training, and most importantly, community. Women who understood, who didn't judge, who knew that leaving took more courage than staying ever did. The scholarship fund, the Thomas Miller Fund, named for her brother who'd made a full recovery, had sent 43 students to university. Kids from struggling families who dreamed bigger than their circumstances. Woo-Jin's business empire had transformed too, completely legitimate now, focused on sustainable development and ethical investing. He'd become someone his younger self wouldn't recognize, and he was grateful for it. The Maldives beach glowed gold in the sunset. 20 of their closest friends gathered in a small circle as Jane and Woo-Jin renewed their vows. A real ceremony this time, chosen freely, celebrated joyfully. Jane wore a simple white dress, barefoot in warm sand, her hair loose and natural. No makeup artist covering bruises, no performance for cameras. Just her, whole and free. I was shattered by glass, Jane said, her voice steady and strong. You didn't fix me. You held space while I rebuilt myself into a mosaic. Now I'm whole, and I choose you. Every day I choose you. Woo-Jin's eyes shone with tears he no longer tried to hide. You taught me that power isn't control. It's creating freedom for others to soar. You are my home, my heart, my purpose. Everything I am, everything I'm becoming, is because you showed me what strength really looks like. They kissed as fireworks painted the sunset sky in gold and crimson and violet, their friends cheering, waves crashing gentle applause. 6 months later, Jane sat in her foundation office, across from a young woman whose name was Mi-sun. I'm 22 years old. Bruises on her arms she tried to hide, fear in her eyes that Jane recognized intimately. I don't know if I can leave him, Mi-sun whispered. Everyone says I'm overreacting. Jane took her hands. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are not overreacting. You are becoming the woman you were always meant to be before someone tried to make you small. Behind Jane, the wall was covered with photos, hundreds of women the foundation had helped, smiling faces, graduation photos, wedding pictures to partners who cherished them, business openings, new beginnings. The office door opened. Woo-Jin entered with 2 coffees, kissing Jane's forehead tenderly. Behind him, a small figure darted in, their daughter Lily, 3 years old, all dark curls and mischief. Mama, Pop, come play, she demanded, grabbing both their hands. Jane looked at Mi-sun. Stay for dinner? Meet some of the other women. Hear their stories. You don't have to decide anything today except whether you want hope. Mi-sun nodded, tears streaming. They say love heals, Jane thought, watching Woo-Jin swing Lily into his arms while Mi-sun smiled tentatively. Truth is, I healed myself. Love just gave me a safe place to do it. And now I'm building safe places for others. That's the real revenge, outliving the pain and creating beauty from ashes. She'd once been a broken girl in a Seoul cathedral, catching a hand mid-slap, finding courage she didn't know existed. Now she was a woman who'd built an empire on kindness, who'd transformed trauma into purpose, who'd proven that the best revenge was living beautifully. The sunset painted Seoul's skyline gold. Lily laughed. Woo-Jin's hand found hers. Jane smiled. She was home. For every survivor finding their voice, this is your story too. You are stronger than you know.